What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Happy Father's Day, Coach. I hope you had a good weekend. How's it going?
It was great. I was at my son's basketball tournament down in Delaware, and they won. They won the tournament, so
Nice.
they got to get the picture taken with a banner and some T-shirts. They love the T-shirts, man. The
Yes.
whole reason to win the tournament is just so they get the T-shirt because that's the swag is important. So that was a nice Father's Day gift.
That's cool. That's awesome. Seeing your son, man, watching him develop and getting better at sports is always a fun experience as a father, for sure. And we have a lot to talk about in this podcast. We're going to be drawing from all sorts of the sports world. We'll be talking to clutch moments, but you want to talk about the UFL championships, which I didn't know they had a championship. I knew they had a championship, but I didn't know when it was. It was over the weekend, I guess. What was your takeaway on the UFL championship first and foremost? Were we talking anywhere else?
It was damn good, Jeff. It was good football.
Who was it between? Who were
90 points? Got 90 points scored in that game.
Oh
It was between the DC Defenders and the Memphis Showboats.
Really? The Showboats were the
that's
team.
A lie.
That
I lied. I just lied to you to see if you were paying attention.
I was like, the Showboats drew. I know. I wrote an article. They drew like less than 2,000 people at a game this year. They made it to the championship.
No, they did not.
It wasn't.
They did not. It was the It was the DC Defenders against the Michigan Panthers.
Oh,
DC's got a pretty good following.
Yeah.
DC's they're famous for the beer snake. They always have a massive beer snake going through the crowd when at their home games. And the first 3 years of the league or of the leagues linking together, the Birmingham team coached by Skip Holtz won the championship. So this is a new champion. 56-34. The schemes were great. The execution was great. But the thing that my big takeaway is this. There's a couple things that this league's getting right that the NFL is not. The NFL is bungling terribly right now. Their onside kick proposals. You have to request it. And now they've moved it a yard. Now it's a 9-yard kick. They moved it actually up a yard to try to give the kicking team a little bit better of a chance to recover. Last year in the NFL, 4% of onside kicks were recovered by the kicking team. And so rather than do that fiasco, what the UFL does is if you're trailing in the fourth quarter and you score, you can request to run their version of an onside kick, which is a real football play. You get a 4th and 12 scenario from your own 28-yard line, and you have to convert. You got to reach the 40. And if you do, you then keep the ball from wherever the conversion was made, and you go on to a drive. And if you don't, then obviously the opponent gets the football wherever you failed. And I think it's really interesting because it just keeps the best players on the field, like the offense and the defense. And it brings scheme back into it, and you're not relying on a kicker and a lucky bounce and anything like that. I think it was about 13% of those 4th and 12s got converted. So now there's a little bit better chance to convert.
Can I ask you a question about that 4th and 12?
Yeah.
First question is, do you think that is challenging enough if it was the NFL? Do you think a 4th and 12 is challenging enough? When you talk about the most high-profile offenses in the league, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, Josh Allen and the Bills, I could keep going. You understand where I'm going.
Yeah.
Is that a challenge enough, though, for them to retain possession, in your opinion?
I would not be opposed to them making it a little more challenging.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like 4th and
15
or 20.
4th and 20. I mean, 4% of onside kicks were recovered last year. 13% of 4th and 12s were converted in the UFL. I think the sweet spot's maybe right in the middle. If you get about a 10% chance, that makes it a long shot, but not impossible.
How do they handle penalties? If there's a defensive holding or if there's a pass interference call, what does that do for did they ever explain that?
I don't know, but I would suspect it's a conversion. That's an automatic first down. Otherwise, if it's not, you're just going to get the defense mauling the receivers.
That's interesting, though, because I almost feel like that's weird. It would be definitely would be an adjustment from a fan's perspective, seeing them go for this. But I didn't want to interrupt, but I had those follow-up questions. Go ahead, continue with how you think the UFL's doing it right in some.
No, that's a good question. I think they do overtime right, or I should say, I think they do an element of overtime right. Their overtime is basically like penalty kicks in soccer. when they go to overtime, you go right to the 5-yard line and you get one play from the 5. And then your opponent gets one play from the 5. And they play on until there's a difference, right? One scores the other and then stops the opponent, etc. What I like is the NFL adopting that. If you play a 10-minute overtime and you're still tied, the idea that the NFL can end in a tie is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That you just and I get they don't want to keep playing on because of player safety. So if you play a 10-minute NFL overtime period and you're still at a tie game, I think this sudden death shootout type format would be fascinating because the immediacy it creates.
Honestly, I think about this in the way that hockey, I don't know if you're a hockey fan.
Yeah.
But if you go back, the NHL used to end in ties all the time. Both teams would get a point and you moved on with your lives, and there's 82 games, so there's a lot of games. And so then they changed up the format again. Overtime is now like 3-on-3 hockey, so there's a lot more ice, increased scoring, but if they don't, they go into a shootout. I think it'd be fascinating if the NFL said, "Hey, after 10 minutes of overtime, if there's no winner, we're doing a kickoff." Meaning the kickers go out and decide who wins it. Like you put the ball 50-yard kick. Okay, so if it's the Steelers versus, I'm trying to think of the Chris Boswell, who's the kicker for the Cowboys, who's made all that news. I can't remember his name. But you're putting the ball 50-yard kick. Can you make it? There's no pass rush. You have to have a snap, hold, kick. It's good. Okay, can the guy match him? Yes. We're moving back to 55. Can you make a 55? I think that'd be funny too. That would be entertaining, but it wouldn't have the player safety component. I think the 5-yard thing it's kind of bleeding into college football, right? Isn't that kind of where it's going? Because that's college overtime, yes?
College is a little bit different. You start at the 25 and you get a series, but it's a similar concept. I just feel watching, I saw some UFL overtime this year. It creates a tremendous sense of urgency. I mean, the game's going to end basically on one play. You're going to have a walk-off.
Yeah.
That is so much more satisfying than the way that a lot of overtimes end, which is with a whimper or the other team gets a possession and the game ends on an incomplete pass in the middle of the field, something like that. So I just think the UFL, this is what this league should be for. It should be for experimentation. And I think they're doing a lot of good things that the NFL should take notice of.
Why do you think the NFL is so resistant to potential changes like this? And they have changed. I do want to be honest, and I want to be fair to the National Football League. They have changed. They were the ones that, adopted this new kickoff rule, which they're still adjusting to make sure it's working the way that they want. And they obviously put in the onside kick thing, which I think is awful. And they've continued to amend that as they go. But why do you think the NFL is so resistant to some of this change?
Well, they've got a product that's making an insane amount of money right now. And I don't think that unless there is a dip in ratings or revenue, there's an incentive to really change the game too dramatically. But there are some rough edges that could be smoothed out. And there are some little things they could do to improve from a competitive standpoint. I come at it from the perspective of keep the offense and the defense on the field as long as possible, because that's real football. Keep the best players in the game on the field rather than a bunch of big linemen and a glorified soccer player. I would just rather see football in its purest sense.
Not big on soccer. That was kind of that was a stray right there.
I mean, I'm not. Soccer should stay in its place. That's all I'm saying.
That's what Pez. Yeah, Pez can deal with the soccer.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So UFL season is a wrap. I'm surprised they also don't continue and schedule their season so it finishes in the lull of the NFL calendar. I'm shocked that they wouldn't be starting their playoffs now. There's no NFL news outside of maybe a couple players signing, maybe some negative news of a player getting arrested or anything like that. Are you surprised by that as well? I mean, this would be the perfect time to get football fans' attention as they're gearing up for training camp, and yet there's no news.
No, I agree with that. That would be a wise move. Take advantage. How much interest is there in mid-season Major League Baseball? The NBA and the NHL are about to wrap up, and you could pretty much have mid-June to mid-July to yourself. That would be a pretty smart move.
And the last part about this UFL is the NFL investing in the league. I wrote an article about the Memphis Showboats. I know their name because I wrote the article for FFSN.com. And it was about how there just had no one there. And I actually talked about how we mentioned this on the podcast a couple weeks ago. If the NFL invested in almost like a minor league system, well, I didn't realize that UFL Twitter is a real thing. And man, people were pissed. They're like, they don't want to be a part of the NFL. They want to be their own entity. The NFL has college sports. Do you think the NFL should, and do you think the UFL would want the National Football League investing in their league?
It's a good question. There's only a couple of franchises that have established strong fan bases. St. Louis is probably the strongest one.
Right.
They've been trying to get an NFL team back for a while, and so they've taken to the Battlehawks. But whether, you look at the ownership group in the UFL, it's an interesting group of people. It involves Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and some guys from the entertainment business, et cetera. And do they want to see themselves as their own entity where they have control of the decisions they make, or do they want to be essentially farmed out by the NFL? That's the interesting question.
We'll see. UFL will rage on. Coach Kevin Smith will be watching. Jeff Hartman will probably because for me, and it's the next topic, is I was watching the U.S. Open at Oakmont, and I was absolutely floored by the difficulty of the course and the conditions. But JJ Spawn comes up with a unbelievably clutch putt to win the U.S. Open. For those that aren't golf fans, that's fine. It was a really lengthy putt. I think it was close to 70-footer, and he makes it. It's just a super clutch moment. The only golfer to finish under par for the tournament. And so the question is what are some of the most clutch moments in football history that you can remember? I'll let you go first.
I thought about that immediately after I watched that putt. 60 plus feet over like an undulating green with a tough break. I mean, it was an absolute classic walk-off to win the guy's first major. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there are some parallels. As far as clutch plays go, when I think about as Steelers fans, I think we're drawn to Super Bowl 43, Ben Roethlisberger's throw to Santonio Holmes amidst triple coverage into an area of the field about the size of a phone booth, while after the Steelers had blown a lead and fallen behind, and he had to take them 90 yards in the final 2 minutes. I mean, that jumps to mind. But JJ Spawn is a guy who is not a big name in the golfing world. He never won a major. I mean, he's been on the tour for a while, but he's not a player who you identify as being one of the greats in the game. And when you think about the way his day started on Sunday with like it started like I start, 5 straight bogeys or something like that. And then to come back from that, that's where I struggle to find a parallel, an unheralded guy who redeems himself at the highest moment and comes away with the ultimate victory. What do you have?
David Tyree comes to mind when you're talking about that. Because
that's a good one.
His helmet catch for the New York Giants over the Patriots, and that was the year the Patriots were undefeated. No one thought David Tyree was going to make that catch. There were other receivers that were way better, but it was David Tyree. And David Tyree, I don't even think he stuck around in the league much after that year. And he'll always have that moment. And JJ Spawn, who's only won one other time on the PGA Tours at the Valero, Texas, years ago, he may not be much in the PGA Tour. He'll be there and he'll win and he'll make some cuts, but he'll always have that U.S. Open. So I think of David Tyree. Yeah, and I think that's when you're comparing the JJ Spawn effect of how he is with the PGA Tour. But when it comes to just clutch moments, man, I mean, there's a lot of them. I think, well, let's go back to Super Bowl 43. Was James Harrison's interception return for a touchdown equally as clutch as the Ben Roethlisberger throw to Santonio Holmes?
I think the Roethlisberger throw is more memorable simply because of being in the final seconds, obviously. Yeah. But the fact that Harrison went rogue on that play, he was supposed to blitz and chose on his own to drop off into coverage, makes it an exceptional play, no doubt about that. You have the Joe Montana drive in Super Bowl, I want to say maybe 19, something like that. You've got Matthew Stafford. You and I have talked about his no look pass, and in that moment, what a gutsy play that was. If we want to go the JJ Spawn route, when you brought up David Tyree, it reminded me of Timmy Smith, the running back for the Washington then Redskins, who was like a third string guy who had been cut a bunch of times, had rushed for a handful of yards, a negligible amount during the regular season, and then goes for over 200 in the Super Bowl and becomes the Super Bowl MVP, and then is never heard from again, which is kind
Yeah.
of fascinating.
I mean, when you talk about clutch, is it only the Super Bowl? We talk in the playoffs because you have the catch with Dwight Clark. I mean, that was a super clutch moment with Montana rolling to his right and looking, finally fires.
Yeah.
Like that
How
that has
about
been that's a clutch moment.
for sure? I was beating up on kickers earlier, but how about Adam Vinatieri in the snow?
Yep.
With the famous game where
Oh, the
they
tuck
bring
roll
out the
game.
snow blower, the tuck roll game, yeah, the tuck roll, but that launches the Patriots dynasty. Vinatieri kicks a 40-some yard field goal in a blizzard to get him into overtime, and they win there, and then the Patriots become the Patriots.
I mean, I think about even like the Minneapolis Miracle with Stephon Diggs, the walk-off. Wasn't that against the Saints, I believe, in the
That was against
playoffs?
the Saints, yeah.
Yeah, just remarkable. We're like, up, they're done. And next thing you know, here's Stephon Diggs catching the ball, running it down the sideline. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to win this football game. There's been a lot of moments, and I know we're leaving a lot of them off the list. But in terms of clutch, what are some of the characteristics that you look for outside of like a game-winning play? Is there a certain criteria for you?
First, well, I think it's generally a notable moment. Like is it a clutch moment if you drive 90 yards down the field and then you score on a 1 yard run with with 20 seconds left? Sure, the whole thing is the clutch, but you don't remember it as much because the drama of the final moment
Yeah.
oftentimes is what makes that thing. Like the image of Dwight Clark soaring through the air to catch that pass, captured so wonderfully by Sports Illustrated. That was such an iconic cover of SI back in the day, or of the impossibility of that throw from Roethlisberger to Holmes. I think that's what makes the thing be more memorable. But really, to your question, it's the overall execution when that pressure is at its highest that sort of defines whether a thing is a clutch moment or not.
I think about like the clutch factor, and for me, there's got to be a lot of risk involved in some way, shape, or form. Talk about David Tyree. He was covered well. Rodney Harrison was on him like a blanket, and he somehow still pulls that pass in. Dwight Clark, there was good coverage. It was just the perfect throw, the perfect time. Same with Santonio Holmes' catch in Super Bowl 43. I'll give you another one. And again, folks that are listening that aren't Steelers fans, I have a Steelers brain, so my brain just goes black and gold. And I also think that plays that get nicknamed are almost always clutch. And so in Steelers lore, there's the immaculate extension. And that's not the reception. That's Franco Harris in 1972. I'm talking about Antonio Brown. You'll probably remember the play. The division against Baltimore's on the line, Sunday Night Football. They run a slant, kind of a pick play to Antonio Brown. He catches it. He gets hit by two defenders and still extends the ball over. The Steelers had no timeouts left. And everyone asked after the game, Mike Tomlin, do you think you would have had time to clock it? And he said, I guess we won't ever have to worry about that because he scored the touchdown. Like, to me, that's a clutch moment. Like, that's the division's on the line, a home playoff game, and you make the right call, you execute the play. There's a lot of risk involved, and you execute it. I think that's some of that. It's a lot of fun when you think back on some of these good moments because, well, they don't happen all the time. There's more not clutch moments than there are clutch moments. But any final thoughts on that, Coach?
Well, I just was thrilled to see that JJ Spawn make that putt because he just seems like a good guy who struggled, talked about giving up the game of golf there for a while. And, those kind of redemption stories are nice.
Yeah, I could talk a lot about him and his story, but that's for a golf podcast that I'm going to record after we're done here. So that's neither here nor there. So let's go to our next topic, number 3 of the day. Anthony Richardson. Boy, that situation in Indianapolis continues to get just strange, weird. He has aggravated the shoulder injury that he suffered last year that had him on and off the roster. It's just it's odd. Obviously, they bring in Daniel Jones this past offseason. Do you think the Colts have given up on Richardson, and what degree are the Colts to blame for this whole thing?
As to whether or not they've given up, I don't know, but I do know this. Reading the reports out of minicamp, he'll now be shut down until training camp starts. He took no reps in minicamp. Daniel Jones really has had an opportunity to solidify the starting job. He'll certainly go into training camp now as the starter. And whether or not Anthony Richardson can even get on the field is a question. And this will be Richardson's third season in the league, and his first two have gone poorly. He was overmatched as a rookie. He was injured and inconsistent in his second year. He had that famous incident where he was kind of accused of quitting on the team when he took himself out of a game for being tired. So if the Colts are faced with a long-term decision on him, I mean, if they get nothing out of him this year and Daniel Jones winds up the starter, they're not going to pick up his fifth-year option. You may see them try to move on from him after this year. You may see them say, what can we get for him now before we have to essentially let him just kind of play out his fourth year and leave? That will be very, very interesting as to how that transpires. But the Colts are partially to blame. You remember this, Jeff, right? Colts versus Steelers last year. Anthony Richardson at quarterback on a scramble play gets hammered, injures that shoulder, has to come out of the game. And like 2 or 3 plays later, they put him back in. And on the very first play, they call a design quarterback run. And he gets hit again, and he's got to come out again. And that hit puts him out for the season. Yeah. I mean, my gosh, that is coaching malpractice right there to put your quarterback at risk in that situation. So the Colts are not innocent bystanders in this one.
Well, and that's the thing. I was going to bring up that series of events that took place last year in Indianapolis against Pittsburgh, and how it's not just Anthony Richardson's fault. He has plenty of blame placed on his shoulders. You tap out of a game as a quarterback. Who does that? I don't care if you're a running quarterback. Have you ever seen Lamar Jackson tap out of a game? How about when Michael Vick was running for his life in Atlanta? Did he ever tap out of a game? Not that I'm aware of. And so it's such a bad look. It's just such a bad look. The optics are so awful that he has a lot of blame. But then the Colts, did they put him out there too early? I think they did. This guy barely started a full season in college, had a horrible completion percentage there in Florida. And you're thinking this is a project. And they're like, nope, he's starting right away. So whoever made that decision, which was that Shane Steichen's first year?
Yeah.
That's partly on him and the organization. Yeah. And then again, okay, the quarterback might be healthy enough to go back out into the game last season against Pittsburgh. Throw the ball, run it, hand it off. Jonathan Taylor, here you go. Don't do a quarterback run. I'm sorry. This is a really bad situation. If I were a Colts fan, I'd be furious. I'd be furious that they made this selection. I'd be furious with how these been handled. I'd be furious with every single possible way that a fan could be upset with an organization. And honestly, I don't see it working out with him in Indianapolis and maybe even in the NFL. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, the Colts have made every mistake you could possibly make with Anthony Richardson. They overdrafted him. He wasn't worth the 4th pick in the draft. They rushed him into the lineup, as you said, and then they didn't do a good enough job of protecting him to try to help him progress once he was there. So, yes, he is at fault, but so is the organization.
Wow, man, that's crazy. Let's go to another crazy situation. We're talking the Bengals, and they've been Steeler fans call them the Bungles because they tend to bungle situations. And this situation with Shamar Stewart, their first-round draft pick, is a fiasco. What exactly, for those listeners that aren't sure about the intricacies of the situation, Coach, give us the rundown. What's going on with Shamar Stewart? He has not signed his rookie contract. He's held out of workouts. He left minicamp early. Tell him what's going on.
So he's in a dispute with the Bengals over the language of his contract, the way it's being structured, the guaranteed money and the incentives. The base salary is just slotted in there because the league now has this rookie wage scale. So that's not really a negotiation, but he's in this standoff now with management there about how the contract is structured in terms of guaranteed dollars and incentives. This is a guy who a lot of people believed underproduced in college. He is an absolute freak when it comes to the measurables. He looks like if you could chisel an NFL edge rusher, out of stone, like you would chisel out Shamar Stewart. But then, and you look at all the measurables and you say, well, why did this guy only have 7 sacks in college? Why does the production not match what, the physical elements suggest they should be? Does he work hard enough? Does he have playbook issues? Does he have attitude issues? And then you show up to your first experience as a professional and you don't take any reps at OTAs and you don't take any reps at minicamp. And then you just leave in the middle of minicamp rather than stay there and absorb the playbook and be around the veterans, et cetera. You leave. there's nothing good that's going to come of this situation unless there's sort of a come to Jesus moment between these two sides.
I don't understand. Like I've heard the rumors about the language in the contract. Unless the Bengals are trying to not give him a fully guaranteed deal, which is pretty standard practice for first round draft picks in the National Football League, that they get fully guaranteed money. It's not a lot of money. We're not talking like, oh my gosh, they're guaranteeing all this money. It's really not. That rookies do not get paid that much. I don't understand. And like you said, how many rookies? Again, Steeler fan, give you this. Derek Hartman went through all phases of OTA since he was drafted, and he worked out. He didn't sign a contract until after rookie minicamp, but he was at rookie minicamp. He's taken it all in. This, again, we bring up Anthony Richardson and who's to blame. I think there's blame on both sides of this. Cincinnati, like, okay, what is the language that he's looking for? Make it happen. Give him what he wants. You need this guy on your team. He's your first round draft pick. He's the face of this draft class and hopefully the face of your future defense. And you're going to squabble over this stuff? I don't get that part of it. Likewise, I agree 100% with what you said. Shamar Stewart, this is how you paint yourself in a negative light with the fan base before you even wear a jersey or a helmet once. If I'm a fan of the Bengals, I'm furious with how this is being handled on both sides of the docket. Just show up and do your job. The Bengals, I don't know if you're being frugal, if you're just being hard-headed, just get a deal done. This seems like out of all the situations, we talk about Anthony Richardson, obviously, but that's over years of him actually playing. This seems like the most avoidable thing ever, and they are just bungling it up. You agree?
Yeah, it's especially confounding when you consider that they're kind of stuck in their negotiations with Trey Hendrickson. I mean, here's your star edge rusher. Here's your future edge rusher. And you can't get either one of these guys signed properly right now. I mean, I hear that they've starting to negotiate again with Hendrickson, probably out of urgency with what's going on with Stewart. But there are reasons, Jeff, why franchises continue to be unsuccessful. And we see that over and over in Cincinnati.
It also goes to show, the Shador Sanders crap that happened during the draft. And everyone said, it's all about skill. It's all about skill. How do they fit? It's also about the individual. So you said Shamar Stewart, like what's going on? Is there something good? Does this guy have some issues? I'm not about to go all draft day on you with Kevin Costner and no one went to his birthday party. Like I'm not doing that. But at the same time, that's why they do their homework on these guys. And if they're not a good fit, and Shamar Stewart, people might say the dude's super talented, but there's a lot of red flags there. Steeler fans heard this with George Pickens when he fell to the second round, and the red flags came to be real issues that have now equated to him being traded to the Dallas Cowboys. There's a reason why teams do their homework. So we'll see how I'm assuming, Coach, I'll give you a chance to chime in here. Shamar Stewart's going to get a deal done. They're going to figure it out, and he'll be at training camp. Do you see any other way that this happens or plays out?
If the guy wants to play NFL football, yeah, because like you said, how much leverage does he really have? At some point, he needs to get in there and get the deal signed. So it'll probably happen, but it's a terrible way to start your NFL career.
All right, so let's finish this up. We've been doing these. We find these. Fox NFL has been putting a lot of these out. Last week, we talked about the top 10 receivers in the last 10 years. Now they're doing pass rushers, the most sacks in the last 5 years. Listen to these numbers. It was incredible to see that TJ Watt's number one. He played 74 games, and he has 73 and a half sacks. That is insane that he almost has a sack a game. Myles Garrett is second with 72 sacks, but he's played in 6 more games, 80 total. Trey Hendrickson's played in 80 total. He has 70.5. Nick Bosa, those top 3, that's the cream of the crop. And then there's a pretty steep drop off. Nick Bosa's fourth, played in 66 games with 53.5 sacks. And then Micah Parsons is fifth, 63 games, 52 and a half. Coach, this is just one statistic. What stands out to you when you look at this?
Well, when I look at that, my first thought is TJ Watt is up for a contract extension. And he's going to run those numbers with his agent to Pittsburgh management. And he's going to show him Myles Garrett's deal, and he's going to show him Max Crosby's deal. And it's the cost of doing business right now. And if you want to sign TJ Watt as a Pittsburgh Steeler, you're going to have to entertain a conversation in the neighborhood of $40 million a year. And I don't know if he'll get that literally, but you're going to be in that neighborhood. And so that's telling. The other thing that jumps out at me about those numbers is that, Micah Parsons, I'm not trying to devalue him. He is great, and he is much younger, and his contract, I think, is going to be massive. But if you're Micah Parsons and his agent, I think I try to get my deal done as fast as you can. I just don't know if it benefits you, because TJ Watt might not get more than Myles Garrett because he's older. Not by much, but he's older nonetheless. And I don't know if that strengthens Micah Parsons' position. If TJ Watt takes a little bit less than what Myles Garrett got, it seems harder for you then, if you're Micah Parsons, to go in and work off of that deal than it is for you right now to work off of Myles Garrett's deal.
When I look at this, and you bring up a great point with Micah Parsons and Trey Hendrickson's also, we talked about how he's trying to negotiate a new deal. This is where Steeler fans and Browns fans, and it's a constant online social media war of who's better, Watt or Myles Garrett. But when I look at all five of these players, I hate the fact these guys can all rush the passer. These numbers dictate that they are phenomenal at getting to the quarterback. But my follow-up question is when you're talking about being a good football player and impacting a game, would you think that is there anyone that comes close to impacting the game as much as TJ Watt does?
We are biased in our views, I'm sure.
Trying to take the black and gold glasses off, but in reality,
empirically, we know what the numbers say, that the Steelers' record with TJ Watt in the lineup versus out of the lineup is a massive contrast. I mean, it's like, what is it, 1-11, something like that, when he's out of the lineup? It's horrendous. I don't know if there's another defensive player in the league that impacts the game quite like that, or at least that the numbers would suggest they impact it like that. And so that is obviously a massive leverage point for him in his contract negotiations. You could go round and round, man. I mean, you want to have a debate as to, who's the best edge rusher in the NFL? Is it Watt? Is it Garrett? Is it Parsons? You bring in people from different, fan bases, et cetera. You're going to get different answers. They're all going to get paid in that same neighborhood. It's just kind of like a game of chicken between Watt and Parsons.
Yeah, because Watt doesn't just have the sacks. He clearly does. He's the number one on this list in the last 5 years, but he also has the pass defenses. He has the interceptions. I mean, how many interceptions these guys have? I'll always go back to the 2023 game in LA where he picks off Matthew Stafford to start the second half. And he was playing zone coverage. And Matthew Stafford openly said, he goes, did I think that an outside linebacker was ever going to bluff me into throwing a ball? And he did. He's an overall football player. And I can't, like, Myles Garrett is as close as you get. But I think the other guys, Hendrickson, Bosa, Parsons, like, they're just pass rushers. TJ Watt is not. He's more than that. But that's neither here nor there. So let's finish this up with a player profile. A guy that deserves some credit. It's Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, who's coming back off of that injury. And he played last season, but it was definitely still recovering. And he's with the Houston Texans now. And he said all the right things. They asked him about his time in Cleveland. He said that fan base deserves a winning season every single year. He is a class act. Coach, what do you want to say about Nick Chubb?
Yeah, I'm just rooting for Nick Chubb. I hope that he is able to get back to something that resembles what he once looked like. I remember, if you think back to 2020, the COVID year, the Browns hammered the Steelers in the wild card playoffs in Pittsburgh, and Nick Chubb, who was, I think, just a second-year player at that time, looked phenomenal. And I just remember thinking, watching that playoff game, damn, this Cleveland line is amazing. Nick Chubb is unbelievable. We're going to have to deal with this for years. And it didn't work out like that. The injuries just decimated him over the next several seasons. And I know that there's some people in Cleveland who are pissed that the Browns didn't make more of an effort to try to keep him, even though I think, they understand that the writing is a bit on the wall with him. They drafted 2 young backs to take his spot. So anyway, man, I hope it works for him. He's a great guy, tremendous worker, good locker room guy, great teammate. And you just like to see him be able to get his career back on track to a degree.
Yeah, and he's been through a bunch of really, really gruesome injuries. Like, some people would say they're career enders, but the dude's a freak. Everyone's seen the weight room workouts of him squatting, I don't know how many, 450 pounds at his high school where he grew up. And like you said, you put it best. I'm rooting for Nick Chubb. And I actually was rooting for Nick Chubb last year, as long as he wasn't playing against the Steelers. Like, you want to see guys like that succeed. I'm sure Coach Kevin Stefanski spoke glowingly of him, although you guys probably only talked about quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, a lot of quarterback talk with Coach, but he did speak wonderfully of Nick Chubb. You know, he just was. You feel for the guy, obviously, because he's the best of him has been taken away by the injuries.
Yeah. All right, good show, Coach. Why don't you tell us what's coming up on the Call Sheet Daily this week?
Yeah, good stuff on the Call Sheet Daily. Wednesday, tomorrow will be our Whiteboard Wednesday episode. We're talking about Steve Scanlon and I are going to talk about summertime preparation. What do you try to accomplish in the summertime as a coach with your program? And then Steve and I are also going to talk about the debut of CoachCast, which is our podcast network for coaches. We're going to, or by coaches, I should say. And then Thursday is our State of the Franchise. We're going to profile the New England Patriots. Nick Hogan from FFSN is going to be my guest. So that'll be a good show as well.
Yeah. Check it out. Wherever you get your podcast, Call Sheet Daily. Thanks, Coach, for your time. Hope you all have a great week. We'll see you next week on another NFL Whip Around. See ya.